Thanks so much for joining me today. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining me today. My voice is a little raspy. I am a little under the weather, but I could not wait not one more week to put out a new video and to share with you our new book. All right, let's get into it. So it's a New York Times bestseller. Um, and Oprah's statement is written on the front cover. And Oprah says, and I quote, "I'll be forever changed by Dr. Eger's story." Pretty substantial, right? The book is called The Choice, Embrace the Impossible. And it's a memoir by Dr. Edith Eva Eger. And I hope I'm pronouncing Eger correctly. And here it is, The Choice. All right, I'm going to make sure that I have a very clear photo of this book on the page so that you can see it and that you could get into it, okay? We are going to start with part one, just like we did our previous book. And I have my notes here. And we're going to go through part one of the book, The Choice. Pretty important topic. Pretty important statement to start off. The choice. Because we all know we always have choices. So if you don't know the story of Dr. Edith Eva Eger, Dr. Eger, she was a child when taken and put into Hitler's concentration camps. So this book and part one focuses mainly on that experience. Unimaginable is my word. Unimaginable. What happened to her, what happened to people during that time, and those people who were taken, and those people who endured. And Dr. Eger endured. And she talks about choices. And it's just unbelievable that even through it all, she talked about choices. So let's get into it. Part one of The Choice. So part one starts off with Dr. Edith basically going over what it felt for her to be part of her family. She talks about the difficult relationship she witnessed and being a party to her sisters teasing her. And one of the moments that she talked about is when her dad was so angry with her and she got in trouble. And when she got in trouble, she thought, on page 19, she says, maybe every life is a study of things we don't have, but wish we did. And the things we have, but wish we didn't. So in essence, she talks about, and she's talking about in her family, how in life, it's about what we have, but yet we're looking. We want more, right? We want more. And it's also about things what we do have that we're not happy that we have, right? And we wish we did not have. So what happened to the older people, and something that Edith finds out about in the end of this chapter 2 is that when her mom was taken away, that she would never see her mom again. And it was thrown in her face, basically. That's how she found out that her mom was dead. Her mom was taken into this place, was moved into this area, and she remembers seeing the smoke coming out of the building. And that's where her mom went. And she would never see her mom again. Pretty sad. And in chapter 3, she dances for the executioner. And this is the group of soldiers, German soldiers, that were separating them, that had separated her mom from her and her sister, and had moved her mom to be killed. And, the German soldiers needed entertainment, and her Edith was known for dancing. She was a dancer. And so she ended up becoming entertainment while in captivity. The executioner is the one who commanded her mom to death, who commanded that her mom goes a different way than she was. But in the end, it's unbelievable. In the end, this is what Edith says about the executioner. She said, she prayed for him because she said he was in worse shape than her, that he has to live with what he had done. And think about it. She is at a place she knows not what is happening. She knows her mom was sent to the area where there was smoke, where they burnt her to death. She knows that this man had something to do with that. She also knows that at any moment she could also suffer and be killed. And yet she prayed for the executioner, as she uses that terminology in her book, The Choice, because he has to live with what he had done. They lose their hair, and her sister, it sounds to me, based on reading the book, her sister was beautiful and had beautiful hair. And one part of chapter 3, her sister says to her, now that they have shaved their heads, her sister says to her, how do I look? And she says to her sister that your eyes are beautiful. And here is another choice that Edith mentions in the book. She says, you have a choice to pay attention to what you have and not what you have lost. In that moment where she and her sister have lost their hair. So that is chapter 3. Unbelievable. Unbelievable, astronomical. These are just words that I can use to explain as best as I can. And I implore you to get a copy of The Choice and follow along, to know that no matter what's happening, no one can take away your mind. What you believe, what you have in your mind, the education you have, whether it be from going to college or the education you have from your family, what your parents have taught you, from reading, from watching a documentary, whatever it is, however you've educated yourself on whatever topic, no one can ever take education away from you. No one can take what you believe in away from you, as it is in your mind, no matter your circumstance. So let's move on to chapter 4. So in chapter 4, they have survived Auschwitz. And you guys should look on this, read about Auschwitz. And they worked in a thread factory. She talks about using humor, as she says, I couldn't defy my oppressors with a gun or a fist, but I could find a way to own power. So that is page 50 of The Choice. I couldn't, and I quote, I couldn't defy my oppressors with a gun or a fist, but I could find a way to own power. And that is another choice. You have a choice to focus on what you can't do or what you are able to do. So they were starving, as you guys know, from what you've learned about the concentration camps and during that period where the Germans took people. They were starving. She takes a risk to run and stole some carrots, but she's caught by one of the guards. And this is in chapter 4. But instead of hurting her, he throws her back inside. She shares the carrots with her sister, and in the morning, the guard came looking for her, and she feared that that was going to be the end. But instead of hurting her, the guard threw down a loaf of bread. And she says this. This is proof. She says that this is proof that not even 12 years of Hitler's terror and hate is not enough to take the good out of some people. You have another choice. You have Hitler, who is commanding these soldiers to do evil things. But in that moment, that soldier made a choice. And she shared that loaf of bread with as many people as she could. So we're on to chapter 5. And I'm going through this specifically to point out choices that are being made, because that is the title of the book. The title of the book is The Choice. And although Dr. Edith goes through the multiple atrocities in this book, in particular, the first part of this book, she chose to focus a lot on choices that were made throughout the time that she was in the concentration camps, choices that she made that kept her alive and kept her mind alive. Okay? So in chapter 5, they arrive at Mauthausen. Not sure if I'm pronouncing this correct. And it is an all-male concentration camp. And in this all-male concentration camp, the focus is, I'm sure you guys have heard, that Hitler was trying to build his own fantasy city. So that's what they're doing in Mauthausen. They're trying to build this fantasy city. And it is a male concentration camp. And it's deplorable. She talks about dead bodies everywhere and not knowing if someone was dead or alive as you're standing and walking over them. Bodies everywhere. It was very difficult work because these men had to carry. They're not eating. They're not hydrated. They have nothing. but they had to carry these heavy rocks um, towards building this city. And they talk about the stairs. This chapter is all about these steps, these stairs. And everyone thinks or is expecting that once you are on these stairs, they call it the stairway to death. And it's so long, the stairs, and it's so crowded, and people are dying all around them. And it's so much so that they had to sleep on the stairs. And she says that she's expecting to die in the morning. And the morning came, they escaped death again, and began another journey walking. And in this walk, they saw so many people who had fallen dead. She becomes weak, so weak, Dr. Edith, and her sister Magda, and another woman who she had shared the bread with years before. Because although I'm going through this book rather quickly, these are years. Years are going by, and they're either just walking, they're not, years. So she saw the lady that she'd shared bread with previously, one of the women, who ended up helping her sister help her to move along, because you cannot stop, you have to keep moving, right? And she felt ill. She was not sure what's happening or what's happened to her, but she could not walk, and they pretty much had to carry her along. And in chapter 6, we're on to chapter 6. We're on to chapter 6. They stopped marching when they reached another city, and they're still so very hungry. And she says, and I quote, "It is hard to tell who is living and who is dead." She talks about diseases, open sores. It's just unbelievable. She sees animal that's been half eaten. That means gnawed off by people who've been eating them because there's no food. They sleep 3 deep in piles. It is so bad that she talks about watching a man eating human flesh. And she says she is starving. But she says, "I will eat grass." She cannot bring herself to eating human flesh. She is occupied in her mind with the choice. The choice. She saw her sister crawling with a can of sardines, because during this time they received permission. Permission was given or was granted that different groups of agencies or different nonprofit agencies were able to provide food to people in the concentration camps. However, it's just great that they could provide cans of food, but they had no way of opening the food. So I would imagine what they were doing was just dropping the food, dropping cans of food, but they could not open the food. So she see where that her sister has gotten a can of sardine, but they had no way to open the can of sardine. And she talks about they're dying of starvation, but they have a can of sardine that they cannot open. And she watches her sister Magda just hang on to the can of sardine. Then she goes to sleep, and she's talks about being in and out of sleep because as I mentioned before, she's ill. So she's ill, she's hungry, she's tired, she has no idea what's going on, no concept of time, just sleep, wake, and she's awakened to explosions. This is the end of chapter 6. And she hears people yelling, "The Americans have arrived." And then she sees the flags, the American flags with the stars and stripes. And the soldiers, the American soldiers, are yelling for people to raise their hand because their body's everywhere so that they can determine who is alive. And she has no energy to raise her hand, no energy. And as they were leaving, the sun was shining, and the can of sardine that her sister had reflected in the sun. And that compelled the soldier to turn back around. And at some way, she probably was hallucinating, but she was thinking of herself as dancing with the soldier. I'm imagining that she's hallucinating at this point. And somehow, in that movement in her mind, she was able to raise her hand. And the soldier saw her, and she says, and I quote, "He was the darkest skin she has ever seen, and with the thickest lips." And that pretty much ends part 1 of the book. And I just want to point out the numerous choices that Dr. Edith talks about as she's going through the most difficult time of her life, of numerous people's lives during that time. In Auschwitz, from Auschwitz to other cities in Germany, and what she experienced and what she remembered from her mom telling her about her mind and not anyone being able to take away what you have in your mind, down to the choice that the German soldier made and provided them a loaf of bread. And in that loaf of bread, she shared with others. And to find out, one of the people she shared the loaf of bread with was, excuse me, one of the people she shared the loaf of bread with turns out to be one of the people who were able to help her sister to carry Dr. Edith along as they walked to another city. Astronomical, unbelievable, and I just, I hope that you guys get this book, and we prepare for chapter 2. So that was, I'm sorry, part 2. So that was just part 1 of the book, The Choice. Very good book. We'll go on to chapter 2. I keep saying chapter 2. We'll go on to part 2 next. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening, even though I am totally congested. I really wanted to get this out. I've been gone for a little bit, but I'm going to push through. And I will see you in the next one for the good of the group. Bye.